MK's Betzalel, Smotrich, and Itamar Ben-Gvir have decided that they're going to run together again in the upcoming elections in November. Ayelet Shaked has stated that she is remaining in the election race despite bad poll numbers. The IDF has done an incredible job in stopping smuggling across Israel's borders from Egypt and Jordan, even as we've seen a huge uptick in smuggling since the beginning of 2022. And a Jew was violently attacked by a mob of Arabs at Samuel's tomb near Jerusalem after he raised, you guessed it, an Israeli flag in the sovereign state of Israel. I'm Josiah, and this is the Israel Guys. Welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of Jew hatred and anti-Israel propaganda, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. Welcome back to the show, guys. First off, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode of the Israel Guys. We're coming to you 3 times a week now. We don't want you to miss what's happening in the land of Israel. So we're going to jump right in and give you an update on the government of Israel, what's happening. Israel, as many of you know, are headed to elections in November. The last government fell apart several months ago. And we're headed to new elections happening on November 1st. So just on Friday, Betzalel Smotrich, who is the head of religious Zionism party, and Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is the head of Otzma Yehudit party, decided that they're going to run together on a joint ticket in the upcoming elections. Now, they ran together for the last elections and ran on a joint ticket in the last government as well. They previously said that they're going to split up and run separately, but it seems like they have thought better of it and decided to run together again. I guess the question is that these guys are both pretty far. They're on the very far right side of the political spectrum. With their parties. The question is, will they agree to sit in a Netanyahu-led government should that happen? Now, it seems likely, we don't exactly know until the actual numbers come out in the election, but it seems that Netanyahu has a good chance of being able to form a government. If he doesn't, and say Gantz is in, would they join the government? According to an article by Israel Hayom here in Israel, they said that it appears that since religious Zionism has a lot of educational institutions, also youth movements, has connections in the kibbutzes and Torah centers, all these things that it's supporting, and these are supporting them, that they're not going to be willing to sit in the opposition. So should Gantz be in? They basically want to be in any coalition government that's led. Obviously, they're not going to join a left-wing coalition, but that's very unlikely as the left-wing parties aren't so popular here in Israel. They wouldn't have enough on their own to form a majority in the government. And also a source from the religious Zionism party said that the joint party would not be ruled out joining a non-Netanyahu-led government. So it seems like there's a chance that they would join Gantz should he be able to form a government, should he be the best candidate to form a government, which would be in connection with Likud probably as well. But you can be sure that these guys will be pushing for a right-wing led government. They will be definitely demanding that a right-wing government should be formed if possible, but it seems like, and hopefully this will be the case, that the right-wing parties will all just unite and say, no, we just need to form a big government, broad government, as many seats as possible. All the right-wing parties just unite and say, let's get as much done, and let's support and build the land of Israel again. The reason they're running together, and it seems a smart move at this point, that if they ran separately, they would potentially, one of them would not cross the electoral threshold, and that's wasting a lot of right-wing votes, because if you have to have, I think, 3.25% of the vote to cross the electoral threshold, something like that. And if you get less than that, then you're not even in the Knesset, and I think you receive, with that percentage of the vote, you receive 2 or 3 seats in the Knesset, but you have less than that, you're not even in. So all those votes are kind of wasted. But if you join with another party, it gives you a better chance of getting more seats together on a joint ticket as well. And the chairman for Otzma Yehudit, Itamar Ben-Gvir, said in a radio interview this last week that the opposition leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, knows that the size of his united list with religious Zionism is what will decide if he wins the election. So if religious Zionism can get enough seats, then that will be probably the deciding factor whether Netanyahu can form a government or not. And Itamar Ben-Gvir is saying here, he says that 11 seats is what he thinks will be a key number. If they can reach 11 seats, then Netanyahu that will be a pretty sure thing that Netanyahu will be able to form a government with their party attached to it. He said, Netanyahu doesn't have a reason to fight us. We hold the key to victory. If our list doesn't reach 11 seats, Netanyahu has no chance of becoming prime minister. I can say that it depends on our voting body. If our voters want a fully right-wing government, they'll vote for us. If not, we'll be small and weak, and we won't form a right-wing government. So these guys are a good party to watch out for and to keep your eye on in the upcoming elections, see how they're doing. The different polls, obviously, poll numbers are going to be changing a lot, but keep your eye on them. It seems like they may play a key part in forming a government in November after elections are held. Also, the former second in the Yamina party, and she's now the Interior Minister, Ayelet Shaked, also in an interview with Channel 12 News, said that she is remaining in the electoral race despite recent polls that showed that her party, she was Yamina with Naftali Bennett. Naftali Bennett stepped down from politics, and she is now joined with several other small parties, and they formed what they call the Zionist Spirit Party. So that's now her party. She's at the head of it. Right now, the poll numbers are showing that she's not going to cross the electoral threshold, but she seems very optimistic. And she said in the interview with Channel 12 News that, quote, I am running till the end. We see that in the current political constellations, there are a lot of right-wing voters, both from religious Zionism and from the responsible statesman-like right who are sitting on the fence, not sure where they're going to vote. We will convince them that the Zionist Spirit Party is their home. And also about the poll numbers, she said, we are currently on an upward trend in all channels, in all polls. You need to know that what is happening right now before the elections is not related to what happens after the elections. If you take the poll taken 70 days before the last elections, Benny Gantz did not pass the threshold, and Gideon Sa'ar had 16 seats, so many more things can turn around. And it's true, the poll numbers can jump depending on like when you're forming a new party, different things like that. Poll numbers can jump around quite a bit, so you never really know, and it's not always accurate what they show leading up to an election like this. Like in the last election, Gideon Sa'ar's party received a lot of poll number seats in different polls that were done leading up to the election, but then when the elections actually happened, it was much less than that. So you'll be watching out for Yamina too. It seems likely that although the poll numbers are bad for her right now, that she may get in. She seems to still be a leading right-wing figure, even though a lot of people were very, very disappointed with what the Yamina party did in joining a government with the more left parties and the Arab parties previously with Naftali Bennett and things like that. So keep an eye on Ayelet Shaked as well in the upcoming elections. Now, we've talked quite a bit in the last few shows, and you can go back and watch them if you haven't seen, about Arab MKs in Israel's government criticizing Israel on its security, different things like that, and also have this very anti-Zionism approach and anti-Zionist statements. Just it's crazy for an MK saying that Israel is a racist state. Talked about that last week as well. But Mansour Abbas, who is the chairman of the Ra'am party, on Saturday night attacked Likud chairman Benjamin Netanyahu and claimed that he is running an incitement campaign against the Ra'am party and the Arab MKs because Netanyahu was accusing them of supporting terrorism. Mansour Abbas said, quote, the time has come for us to respond to all this incitement. Netanyahu, who negotiated with us, comes out in videos and accuses us of being supporters of terrorism, as if there are no enforcement authorities. If we were supporters of terrorism, we would be in a completely different place. Maybe not so much in the democratic state of Israel, which we've seen that these guys are elected to the Israeli Knesset, and yet they still come out with statements that are maybe not blatantly in support of terrorism, but like condemning Israel for attacking, blaming Israel for killing children in Gaza when that didn't even happen, making up lies about Israel, different things like that. And Netanyahu is apparently calling it out for what it is, support of terrorism. And so Mansour Abbas is threatening Netanyahu. But even though he made these statements about Bibi Netanyahu, he did not rule out the possibility of sitting with Netanyahu in a government. He said, I will hope we will succeed in getting a majority and we'll form a government of change. Who will head it depends on the results of the elections. There's a party that reached out to us and there's a party that negotiated with us, and I will not forget that. Seems like he's referring to the previous government. But he said, at the moment, we have to turn to the block of change. We have no interest in disqualifying anyone and no party. So obviously they prefer the left side of the political spectrum and the left-wing parties, but he's saying he's not disqualifying anyone or any party. So seems like he's, although very highly unlikely that Netanyahu would invite him to join his coalition. Very highly unlikely, but saying that. So very interesting things coming from these Arab MKs, Israeli MKs in Israel's Knesset as well. We're going to talk about what's happening with smuggling on Israel's borders. It's a huge uptake just since the beginning of the year. But first, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, and I want to tell you how you can support Judea and Samaria and support the small businesses and families of Judea and Samaria. For those of you who have been listening to us for quite a while, you probably have heard of BDS by now. Or just a supporter of Israel and follow Israel closely, you know about BDS. BDS stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Against the Jewish State. And unfortunately, it is a well-funded and organized attempt to destroy Israel's economy and to promote this anti-Semitic, anti-Israel feeling around the world. With this in mind, our friends, good friends at Blessed by Israel have come up with their own version of BDS to bless, defend, and support the people of Israel. That's the best BDS I've come across as well. Don't boycott, just bless. Don't divest, just defend and serve the people of Israel, especially those living in the biblical heartland of Israel. You know, here at the Israel Guys, we are ardent supporters of the biblical heartland of Israel. That's where we're recording the show live from today. But what you need to know about is the Heartland Challenge, and you can share this all over social media as well. What is the Heartland Challenge? It is encouraging supporters of Israel all around the world to commit to using certain products only from Judea and Samaria. So whether it's olive oil, tea, soap, ceramics, or something else, Blessed by Israel is encouraging everyone to buy what you believe in and then share the message with your community and friends. So you would just commit to saying, I'm only going to buy, let's say, honey. I have honey from Blessed by Israel from families that make it inside of Judea and Samaria. Say, I'm only going to buy my honey from Judea and Samaria. You can go to blessedbyisrael.com, purchase that honey, and support the biblical heartland of Israel. Guys, also ceramics. They have a lot of things, but I just have a couple examples here because they brought us the products. Were right here in the biblical heartland of Israel. Ceramics made from a family just across the hill here in Itamar. And guys, it's time for you to put your money where your mouth is. If you support Israel, why not buy and support these families who live in the biblical heartland of Israel? It's time to build and invest in Israel. Join the Heartland Challenge and spread it across social media that show what you're doing. Maybe take a video, show them that you are supporting the heartland of Israel. But go to blessedbyisrael.com to get your products from Judea and Samaria. Again, that's blessedbyisrael.com. Link is in the description below, or you could click up here and find out more. Also, if you use the code INVEST at checkout, you can get $5 off your first order. Again, that's blessedbyisrael.com. Use code INVEST to get $5 off your first order. Link is in the description below. Go support the heartland of Israel. The IDF has been doing an incredible job recently in thwarting smuggling attempts that have been made across Israel's borders, mainly with Egypt and Jordan. Now, a report published by the IDF showed a huge uptick in smuggling attempts, arms, and drugs across Israel's border with Egypt and Jordan just since the beginning of 2022. But just over the weekend, this last weekend, the IDF observation soldiers spotted a suspect along the Jordanian border, and the border police and the Israeli police forces were dispatched to the scene and apprehended the suspect, who carried 10 handguns adjacent to the borders. But also, they've been finding a lot of weapons, a lot of drugs, and just since the beginning of 2022, there has been a huge increase to smuggle arms and drugs into Israel. And the IDF has been surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, but increasingly successful in foiling these smuggling attempts. The IDF, together with the Israeli police and other security agencies, have been working to stop this smuggling very hard, and they have confiscated 40 drug smuggling operators just coming across the board just since the beginning of this year. And they've confiscated enough drugs worth 135 million shekels, and I think over 300 weapons that have been tried to smuggle into Israel. And just in the last, or the 2 years previous, there were 21 operations to smuggle across Israel's borders that they caught and they found, but they've stopped 40 just since the beginning of this year. Lots of handguns, or lots of weapons, and lots of drugs as well. So thank God that the IDF is keeping on the alert and trying to keep Israel safe and stop these illegal smuggling of these harmful drugs and weapons coming across Israel's borders, going into a lot of these Arab areas a lot of them inside of Judea and Samaria as well. Another terrible thing happened actually on Friday was a Jew was attacked at Samuel's tomb near Jerusalem. A Palestinian mob on Friday attacked a Jewish man who was, maybe not surprisingly, but he was brandishing a Israeli flag. He was waving an Israeli flag at the Samuel's tomb site in Jerusalem, and this Arab mob surrounded him, beat him. Short video actually on social media circulated quite a bit, showed numerous Palestinians kicking, beating this guy, pummeling the man to the ground with their flag staffs that had Palestinian flags on them. Thankfully, the Israeli soldiers, the Israeli police ran up very quickly and stopped it. The man was okay. It seemed he refused treatment, emergency medical treatment, but with a few minor injuries escaped for the most part, unharmed. Thank God. It could have been a lot worse. But the district border police in Jerusalem detained 5 Arabs for questioning that were suspected in starting this attack. Terrible thing, but just a Jew walking up and raising an Israeli flag, you get that kind of response from these Arab communities. And apparently there was a protest that had been happening at Samuel's tomb for several weeks. And actually, the director of Samuel's tomb talked about it in an interview today, I believe. But that last Friday, the protests seemed to take a much larger turn for the worse and ended up with this mob pummeling this Jewish guy, just beating the tar out of him. And thankfully, he escaped relatively unharmed. But stuff like this is just crazy, and it can't happen. And unfortunately, it does happen, but the world doesn't pay any attention to it. And we have to support Israel and say, no, we're not okay with Jews being beaten and pummeled and beaten for the sake of just raising an Israeli flag in the sovereign state of Israel. Yeah, there's a lot of tensions with things like that, and especially when you have political leaders, Palestinian leaders, who are inciting this kind of stuff. It's happening more and more, and unfortunately, it's the case it is in Israel. But we hope to see a downtick in this, and as the Israeli security forces do an amazing job with protecting people, we definitely see that. So guys, continue to support Israel, continue to pray for Israel, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and show your support. Declare it boldly, because Israel needs the support of the world more than ever. Christians around the world to support and say, we stand with the Jewish people and their right to establish a Jewish state, and they have established, but to continue to live and exist in the Jewish biblical land of Israel. That is the Jewish people's inherent right. Guys, let us know what you think in the comments below. We love interacting with you down there. So go down there, leave us a comment, tell us what you think, and tune out the fake news and tune in to what is actually happening in the land of Israel. We'll be back every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with your direct connection to the land and people of Israel.